Welcome back to The Leak, still the only news program that begins with dubstep, your move, Lillian Chin. I'm Michael Schaefer, and returning to Season 2 with me is the irrepressible Anthony McCormack. And joining us on the panel this year is Jacqueline Mifsud. Now, plus each week we have a special guest panellist. Please welcome our first guest of the year, Justine Sless. Well, we've been off air for 6 months, and I can only presume that we are your only news source. So let's quickly catch you up on what's happened.
OK, so we've still got the same Prime Minister, well, for the moment anyway.
Johnny Depp called Barnaby Joyce an inbred tomato.
And 60 Minutes did an expose on what it's like to spend time in a Lebanese jail.
Very well. Well, now that you're all caught up, let's get stuck into the news from this week. So this week, former Australian Idol host James Matheson announced that he'll be competing against Tony Abbott for his seat in Warringah.
I get it, it's weird, you know. There's the guy from the TV entering politics and running a campaign against Tony Abbott. What? I don't understand this. This makes no sense. But it kind of does.
No, James, you're right the first time. It makes no sense.
I am very excited about this. I feel like James is going to be able to bring some of that Australian Idol showmanship to this election. I feel like let's announce the winner of that particular seat at the Sydney Opera House in a 3-hour TV spectacular. And right before they announce the winner, cut to a commercial.
Like that's what we need, more reality TV presenters running for office. Next we'll have that bloke from The Bachelor asking to run for office against Abbott.
Oshik Gunsberg.
Bless you.
Very, very strange.
OK. Michael, I reckon really, though, you should give James a little bit more credit. Like, he really actually does get politics.
Rattle the cage. The trouble is, this two-party system means all you got to do is be less shit than the other guy. That's it.
See, and now all he's got to do is eat an onion, or not eat an onion, and he's miles ahead.
He's nailed it,
Yeah, he's got it. He's in.
Now, if James replaces Tony, will Tony then have to replace James? Can we see Tony host his own reality show? Maybe something in a vein of, So You Think You Can Be Knighted? Just a little mock-up we've done there.
But for those who think that James hasn't got a chance, check out his campaign manager.
How I wish I was Warungran. Warungran is what I wish I was. If I was Warungran, I know who I'd vote for. Jim Bob Matheson. Bob Matheson. Touchdown. Jim Bob. Vote one above the line or below the line. Somewhere around the line.
I think that crossed the line. But he's definitely going to win now, I think, with Mark Holden's endorsement.
Well, we've seen a piece of toast that looks like Jesus, a potato chip that looks like Abraham Lincoln, but put all that to one side, an amateur photographer in Bulgaria has discovered a tree that looks a lot like a popular fantasy character. Let's have a look at that tree. All right, there he is there.
Yeah. Is that meant to look like Jesus?
I think I can see Mark Holden in it. Is that?
No, it's neither of those two, lamos. No, this has been in no way adopted. It's naturally occurring. This is the character Treebeard from The Lord of the Rings. Let's compare these two side by side. Look at that! Isn't that uncanny?
Very good. It's a tree that looks like another tree. Very good.
Exactly.
That's a top story, Anthony, although I reckon that tree will be doing wonders for tourism in Bulgaria. Yeah? People will come flocking, postcards, key rings, the whole lot.
I love to flock a postcard. It's been announced that Melbourne public transport officers will scrap on-the-spot fines next year. The current system forces fare evaders to choose between either paying a $70 fine on the spot by FPOS, dealing with a $223 fine in the post later on, or eating a live eel.
Probably go with the fine, I reckon.
Potato, eel, potato. All right. They said that the current system wasn't doing what it was meant to do, catching repeat offenders, and instead it was just making tourists and students cry.
That's a mature age student there in the bottom left, isn't she?
It's not an accurate representation. Anyway, here are a few ways Mikey is going to improve the system. Fitting anti-glare screens on Mikey machines, processing online top-up times from within 90 minutes instead of 24 hours, and my favourite, louder beeps.
Well, that was always the problem with Mikey, wasn't it? It was the beeps that were too soft. That was always what we
It's a
complained
beep,
about.
soft beep.
I think Mikey is getting too soft. They're making everything friendlier. That's not the Mikey way. I want to see them get rid of those FPOS machines and just carry around just tasers. Just tasers.
I don't know. I think that's a bit harsh, Anthony, don't you?
Maybe a softer option, just everyone gets tackled immediately by 3 heavy-set people.
Okay.
It's worked well with them so far, yeah.
Okay. And meanwhile, Sam Thaiday made headlines after Queensland beat New South Wales in the State of Origin game. And he used these words to sum it up.
How was that, Sam?
Yeah, it was a bit like losing your virginity. It wasn't very nice, but we got the job done.
That interview was like how I lost my virginity. It was very awkward and caught on camera. Bye-bye. Thank
He
you.
makes it sound like work. I think if you're having that much fun, you should just get out of there.
I think he just needs to be performance reviewed out of there, actually.
Well, that's the end of our first segment. It wasn't nice, but we got the job done. We'll see you after the break. Welcome back. Well, our first guest for tonight is Courtney Stringer. In 2014, Courtney climbed to the Kalapatha Peak of Mount Everest. I think I pronounced that correctly. Everest. It's just above base camp. Courtney, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. I had the best time.
Well, tell us about it. So, Courtney, you got up to just above base camp. So that's what, like about 3,500 kilometres high, right?
I did, and we had 50% oxygen. It was awful. I mean, great, but awful.
And so why did you go like, because it's like 8,500 or so. So why did you stop there?
One, we didn't have enough time. You need 3 months and $40,000 to have the equipment and the permits to go to the peak. So,
Wait, it cost $40,000 for 3 months on Everest.
yeah, including all of the equipment there and the permits. It's a lot of money and a lot of time and a lot of effort.
That's worse than like an inner Sydney apartment. Jesus Christ.
Didn't you go to the sales at Kathmandu?
Sorry, didn't I go where?
Didn't you go to the sales at Kathmandu?
Oh, I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
No, it was
it was a
great
killer
joke.
question.
Absolute zinger. That's
So,
fine.
Courtney, did you get any sort of altitude sickness?
Yeah, a little bit. When we got to Namche Bazaar, which is about halfway, I started getting a bit headaches. There was always a bit of nose bleeding, but persevered. It wasn't too bad, and I got over it.
So there are a lot of disaster movies coming out, recently about Everest, about people getting sick when they reach those high heights. Have you seen one of those movies and you nudge the person next to you and say, that happened to me?
Every time. Nearly every single time. I'm like, see that place? I went there. No biggie. It was
Courtney,
brilliant.
I heard that you went there for your 4-year anniversary with your boyfriend and you forced him to go up Everest.
Oh,
I can't
it
get a
was-
man to buy me a latte and you can get a man into Nepal. What's your secret? Taking
Look,
that.
he didn't really have a choice. I did tell him what we were doing. There wasn't much of a, hey babe, what do you reckon? So that's how it went down.
And tell us about the Sherpas up there, Courtney. So everyone knows about Edmund Hillary and all the guys who have scaled Everest. No one knows about these Sherpas. I feel like they're just the unsung heroes here.
Oh, they really are. The amounts of weight they carry on their backs, I mean, it's ridiculous. I saw someone carrying 5 doors up there and, the yaks help, but the manpower is definitely the force behind it all. It's very impressive.
5 doors.
Yep, wooden doors that were just 3 metres tall. It's unbelievable.
Just for lols?
Sorry.
Why do you need doors? Am I the only one that I don't know, oh mate, we need some hiking gear, we need some crampons, we need doors.
Well, they have villages all the way up, so they need
doors.
the doors, yeah.
Okay.
Were you born in a tent, Jack? You need a door, don't be ridiculous.
Does that kind of take away the achievement of it, that you climb all that way up and then there's just a person outside their front door just living there, just sipping a mug of tea?
Yeah, it definitely was. We got back down and people live there and that's their livelihood, that trekkers go past, and I can't imagine living at that altitude. It's ridiculous. But
What's the Wi-Fi like up there?
Sorry?
What's the Wi-Fi like? Have they got a Wi-Fi password or is it just
You know
free?
what? They did, and it was excellent.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I guess we're all learning something tonight. I didn't expect that. That's
No,
fantastic.
it was great.
Courtney, the last thing I wanted to ask about was that obviously it's quite dangerous up there because a lot of people come and they flock to Mount Everest during a 3-month period of the year, which is not when you went.
No, you're right. So most of the peak climbers, they go during the summer because it's less likely to have avalanches and those kind of things. So we went end of winter, which is a lot more icy, but less people, less of a hassle, less, just better views, better time.
Fantastic. I might go up to Port Douglas this year, so doesn't really compare, does it? Courtney, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much. I had a really good time.
All right, homelessness is a huge problem in Melbourne, with basic needs such as access to hygiene being a huge issue. And I took a look at one organisation that's doing a lot to help out.
If you're anything like me, the only time you've dreamt of being wet and naked on a city bus is in that reoccurring nightmare where you wake suddenly, drenched in your own piss, clutching a boiled egg. But thanks to some very compassionate people at One Voice, that dream is soon becoming a reality. One Voice, not to be mistaken with that television program The Voice or a John Farnham cover band, is providing safe and dignified access to a service that everyone should be entitled to. Even the judges of The Voice. They created a shower bus. The shower bus was converted from an old bus into 16 showers for the less fortunate. Some buses weren't so lucky as they had to come out of retirement to be converted into party buses for 18-year-olds to vomit all over and dry hump in. There have been a few cases where party buses have been driving themselves off cliffs and into the Montague Street Bridge. If you listen carefully around 1 a.m. on Fridays, you can hear them screaming, "I'm too old for this shit." Much like those buses, our heartwarming story takes a turn for the worst. The Melbourne City Council fined the shower bus $91. That's roughly 9 cups of Melbourne coffee. The bus received a fine for being parked in a bus zone. So what's next? Smokers being fined for smoking in the smoking section, dogs being fined for not wearing pants, pants being fined for not wearing dogs. To get a better understanding of this concerning situation, we reached out to Janice McGill, a Melbourne parking inspector. But we were since told she was, quote, off eating gruel with an undercover public transport officer. So instead, we decided to interview this leaf. The shower bus has been in operation since December and has been making a real difference for those less fortunate. So why is the council trying to rein in its soapy parade? I believe I have the answer. The Melbourne City Council is protecting its citizens. If homeless people have access to showers, they'll begin to look and smell just like us. And soon we won't be able to tell who's homeless and who's not. What if we end up treating them like they're one of us? Makes me want to have a shower.
Welcome back. Well, the federal election is fast approaching and the League's head writer Lance Turnbull is very excited. In addition to being our head writer, Lance also compiles the teleprompter script for the show. He's an all-round handsome guy and literally my favourite person. Make a kissy face in and lick your lips while you say this, Michael, you big sexy idiot. Ugh, bloody oath, Lance. Lance Turnbull filed this report.
Prime Ministers. We all have one, but not all of us know who they'll be in a month's time. or who they are now. Yes, with the federal election set for July 2nd, Australia may soon have a new Prime Minister, but maybe also it won't. Will Malcolm Turnbull remain in the top job, or will the opposition leader not be the opposition leader anymore and instead be the Prime Minister? Australians wait with bated almost total indifference to find out. Coming into the Prime Ministership with a well-received and robust stance on not being Tony Abbott, Malcolm Turnbull has since seen a decline in popularity, with some saying that he's abandoned his principles for power. On the other side of the politics is the opposition leader, who is the leader of the Labor Party. Let's see where our leaders stand on the key issues. On same-sex marriage, Turnbull now supports Tony Abbott's old policy of spending $160 million taxpayer dollars on delaying the inevitable change to the Marriage Act, a national plebiscite. The opposition leader, on the other hand, supports simply having the government vote on it, which is a lot cheaper, and also that's literally the government's job. On tackling climate change, both men agree that immediate action is required, but disagree on how to do it. While Malcolm Turnbull supports the existing policy of direct action, under which this country's emissions have risen steadily over the last few years, the opposition leader supports the implementation of an emissions trading scheme, which is a bit like a carbon tax, except it's not called a carbon tax. But perhaps the starkest difference between the major parties is on the issue of refugee boat arrivals. While the Labor Party support the indefinite detention of asylum seekers on remote Pacific islands and boat turnbacks for new arrivals, the Liberal Party instead support the indefinite detention of asylum seekers on remote Pacific islands, boat turnbacks for new arrivals, and that the Labor Party can't be trusted to be harsh enough on the issue. Last Sunday, the two great minds met in an explosive battle of the talking points in what has been described as a snooze fest and a disgrace. Despite showing up in matching costumes, no, not that one, the one with the red tie. Despite showing up in matching costumes, the two leaders' empty rhetoric couldn't have been more different. Malcolm Turnbull said that he was the man to trust on the economy. Jobs, growth, jobs and growth, and jobs and growth. But Labor are the ones to trust on schools, healthcare and housing affordability, said opposition leader Shirt Bingley? And both men claim to have the answer to budget repair. While Malcolm plans to cut taxes for the rich, which will somehow lead to investment, jobs, growth, jobs and growth, Bing Crosby plans to just manage the economy real good and be responsible but also fair. So who won the debate? Judging by the ratings that night, it was MasterChef by a good lead. Perhaps the next debate could be livened up by incorporating elements from that show.
To ensure that Australians remain a high-wage, generous social welfare net, first world economy.
Or they could make the debate a literal fight, where Short Round attacks with his trusty hammer and sickle, while Turnbull uses projectile weaponry, a barrage of Apple Watches. Or they could even incorporate a swimsuit competition. Whatever happens, the nation will be watching, or just as likely, not watching, these two battle it out for another month yet. One thing's for sure though, on July 2nd, one of these men will be handed the reins to this bucking stallion of a nation. And with a firm hand and a steady heart, they will lead this country for like a year and a half until the polls go bad and their party replaces them. Brimby Stardust?
Certainly a lot to think about there, wasn't there, really? Let's have a little look now at the politics of milk, shall we? Hiding under a cow's udder for the last few years, you would know that supermarkets are at war with farmers over the price of milk. Remember when milk was just milk? When we didn't care about the fat content? And remember those giddy, pre-hipster-geddon days before we knew what soy was and before we even cared or gave a damn about what permates were? Sadly, those days are long gone, because now we are in a raging milk war where people are being assaulted in supermarkets for buying home brands. Supermarkets are in armed combat, wielding their surly sourness and not giving their farmers a fair price for milk. And we the consumers are prepared to pay more for water than milk, and we're not even giving a Barnaby Joyce about it. So let's end the war. Milk the cows, not the farmers.
I always want to do the ethical thing, but at the same time, I want cheap shit.
Yeah.
So this is my solution. This is what I reckon we have to do. We have to buy up big before we know who we're screwing over. We need to stockpile, and then we stop.
I try and do the ethical thing as well. I don't actually drink milk. Makes me gassy. Most things do. Different show. So I drink coconut milk, and then I realise that even though I think I'm helping out, I don't know how much those kids get paid to climb those trees. So we're all damned to hell.
I actually go into Aldi to buy cheap milk, but I end up coming out with a whippersnapper, extendable garden shears, and a washing machine.
Oh, Anthony, you must be the only person who goes into Aldi. Wow, that's amazing.
But the thing is, there's so many varieties of milk. There's almond, there's cashew, there's mother's milk, and everyone's being exploited. Like, really, particularly the nuts.
I guess buying milk is a lot like losing your virginity. Don't do it at Aldi.
Well, we heard about the opposition leader Bill Shorten earlier in the show, but now let's take a look at how he came to be the man we know today.
This week on your local community channel, join us for the screening of a modern-day classic starring Audrey Hepburn and current Labor leader Bill Shorten in the role of a lifetime.
Eliza Doolittle, one of the most responsible things you can do as a Labor leader is undertake some kind of speech therapy.
You want to teach me how to talk proper, don't you?
No, I need you to teach me how to speak to the working class. I could have danced.
Danced.
I could have danced.
Danced. I could have danced all night.
I could have danced.
Oh!
How's this? With.
No. With.
Growth.
Growth.
Youth.
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 Oh, this is hopeless. I'll never be able to connect to the common man. Damn my private school education to hell.
My Fair Shorten, featuring such classic and memorable hits as Wouldn't It Be Labourly? I've grown accustomed to his slang. Get me to the polls on time. I'm an ordinary man, I absolutely promise, and many more.
The rain in Spain stays mainly in the plain.
The rain in Spain stays mainly in the plain.
Let's try something else. My neighbour votes Labour. Gough Whitlam's his saviour.
My neighbour votes Labour. Gough Whitlam's his saviour.
Oh, by George, I think he's got it!
I think I've got it.
My neighbour votes Labour. Gough Whitlam's his saviour.
My Fair Shorten. This Friday, 6:30 p.m. on your local community channel. That's followed at 8:30 by Les Miserables.
We'll be back after this break. Well, community radio is under threat from losing its funding. We spoke to Tess Lawley, the General Manager of SYN Radio, earlier to chat about the future of community radio. Hey Tess, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
So Tess, tell us about the future of community radio. So today was a big day for you guys?
Yeah, well, it's a little bit uncertain at the moment, to be honest. We've had a funding cut from the federal government, which means that we're in need of $1.4 million per annum in order to keep broadcasting on digital radio. If we don't get that money, we might get pushed off the digital spectrum, which means that pretty unfortunately, at some point in the future, FM might get turned off and there may not be community radio on digital radio. So the future of community radio is somewhat uncertain until we get a commitment from the coalition.
So what's going to happen if the coalition don't get in, then obviously it's probably going to be Labor, unlikely to be like the Sex Party. Do you know what Labor's position is on all of this?
Just yesterday, both Labor and the Greens made a commitment to restore that $1.4 million of funding. So if Labor or the Greens form government, we'll be all sweet. But we're hoping before the election that the coalition will come to the party too, and it won't matter who's taking government, we will have our future secured.
So in terms of community stations, how many of them are analogue and how many are all the ones that you can listen to on any radio also on the digital radio?
Not as yet. So at this point in time, there are 37 community radio stations on digital as well as analogue. Some of them are simulcasting, some of them are taking different streams on both channels, which is what SYN's doing. But there's over 400 community radio stations across Australia. So the digital licences are currently only operating in metro areas, which means that it is your SYNs, your Triple Rs, PBS, these kinds of radio stations that are at risk right now. But we're all in this together as a sector, and I think the CBAA is absolutely working their guts out to get regional and rural stations on air as well. And if we lose our spectrum in the major cities, it's going to be really, really hard to fight tooth and nail with the government to gain digital spectrum in regional areas as well.
Oh, that's no good. Well, I'm pretty sure that community TV is ending next year. Do you reckon you could just put in a good word for us while you're fighting this cause?
We, as the CBAA, has been fighting really hard, working with community TV for a long time now. Like, it's a serious shame, and it's like, you see this from the federal government. They have control over the spectrum, which is a really finite resource that's worth a lot of money to them to privatise, but worth a whole lot to the community if it's actually available to us. And, you know, the way community TV's been pushed off air is a damn shame, because it means that great shows like this and communities that otherwise wouldn't have a place on broadcast television now have nowhere to go. And, you know, digital radio is the future of radio, and so we're facing similar risks.
Well, you said it costs $1.4 million. Have you started is there any funding campaign set up already that people can donate to if they want to?
Well, unfortunately not. I would love to do just a casual crowdfunder every year for 1.4 million. That'd be easy, right? With
why not?
prizes and whatnot. Yeah.
Well, we've solved it, haven't we? Well done. Thanks for joining us, Tess.
Unfortunately, it's not that simple, because it has got to do with spectrum allocation as well. So that 1.4 million is per annum. So it's an ongoing fee, and it's something that needs to be instated for community broadcasting ongoing. And it's not quite as simple as, say, SYN as a community station can just get enough to cover our digital broadcast. The whole sector needs to be on air.
So, but just to play devil's advocate for a second, Tess, because I mean, a lot of people, maybe they're watching this show for the first time, maybe they're tuning into community radio and they hear, you know, the voices aren't quite polished, you know, the things go wrong a lot of the time, and they say, what value is this to me? So what if we do lose these stations? What are we losing? What's the community?
I think the fact that community radio doesn't always sound perfect is a testimony to why we need it. Community radio announcers are real people from your community who are there sharing their genuine views, their genuine opinions. Yeah, it's not like a smooth, commercial sounding voice, but, you know, when we think about those voices, it's a very specific voice that you're listening to, you know. It's a very certain type of privilege to be able to be on mainstream media, and the community deserves to have access to that in the form of broadcast.
And many presenters have started their life off in community radio. Hamish and Andy, for example.
Started on SYN, in fact.
Indeed. So there's real value in being on community radio, and without it, what do you think would happen if there is no community radio?
I think it'd be a serious loss to our community. You know, community radio was legislated over 40 years ago in a bipartisan agreement. And it was legislated to be on air because it was deemed an essential service that was necessary for giving communities of people who are marginalised, people who don't have the opportunity to turn up on a commercial radio station, giving them the airtime to actually share what's important to their community. So, you know, there's absolutely the fact that people are learning, developing their skills, increasing their confidence. And those opportunities will be lost really quickly because you can't just walk into a commercial radio station and ask to get on air.
I've tried several times actually, Tess, and they keep letting me down. But anyway,
this
Tess,
is the problem, you know. You should be able to walk into a commercial radio station.
Well, they keep changing the locks at Fox FM, and it's really frustrating. But
different reason.
Well, we'll keep that on the DL.
Let's not admit to committing any crimes on broadcast television for now.
No, they weren't crimes. They were... Anyway, my point is, thanks so much for joining us, Tess. We've got to go to our next segment, but really appreciate all your work you're doing, and thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Well, this week, Justine looked into the cultural phenomenon of the election day sausage sizzle.
Like many parents of primary age school children, I stink because I'm a classic fundraising fatigue. Whilst many portfolios are dynamic, think, you know, chocolate drive to help tackle childhood obesity. The sausage sizzle at the polling booth election day is the pinnacle in fundraising. Think stamina, commitment. On Monday, the 44th Parliament dissolved, and in it there were 72 women. The margin of women to men at the polling booth sausage sizzle is around...
Fascinating. Yes, well, deserves that amount of facts. No, this week I took a look at something a little more glamorous.
Sparkles, glitter, disco balls, tight clothing and singing in different languages. No, it's not Taco Tuesday at Molly Meldrum's house, it's Eurovision. A time where all of Europe gets together and pretends they don't want to kill each other. Now that's all very well and good, but what has it got to do with us? Australia was invited to compete last year for Eurovision's 60th anniversary and is now taking the piss. Like that distant cousin who said they were just going to stay for the weekend and now lives on the couch. This year, that cousin got off the couch, put on some pants, took the form of a girl named Dami M, and blew everyone's European jocks off. With this performance. Im ended up coming in second place with Ukraine taking the throne as the Queen of Europe. But now, videos have emerged proving that Australia just might be the rightful winner of Eurovision. That European Song Contest, that's in Europe.
Wait, what's the footage that has emerged?
Let's take a looky look. So that was My Rocker Stedford. No, it wasn't. It was a sort of upskirt cam version of the Ukrainian Eurovision song, say that with a mouthful of marbles, performing that award-winning song in 2013, which would disqualify them, because you're not allowed to just do an old song, you're going to make a newie.
Oh, can I just say, I think Ukraine have had it pretty hard already. It's amazing they won in the first place, considering Russia annexed a quarter of their votes. It's amazing.
Now, didn't Ukraine's song almost get rejected because of the lyrics?
Yes, it was accused of having politically motivated lyrics, which is a big no-no. The Eurovision rulebook, it's very, very big, it states that you can't have lyrics, speeches or gestures of a political nature or similar nature, or human nature.
Oh, so great. So they literally have a don't mention the war rule in Eurovision.
Yes. That's what happened.
Fantastic.
Yes.
Well, look, there have been some racist comments, you know, of people being like attacking Dami because like she was born in Korea or something. Look, and I just don't understand. I think the main point is that she wasn't born in Europe. I think that was the main thing that you could really be having a crack about.
Yeah, but Dami described a Eurovision moment as feeling like Kathy Freeman's gold medal winning performance at Sydney Olympics. Yeah, same.
Well, I tell you what, you guys are poo-pooing poor Dami. Dami is a national hero. I mean, who do we have representing Australia in the sporting field? We have Grant Hackett, Bernard Tomic, Shane Warne. I think for this year's Olympics, we should just send Dami.
Can I just say, do you know what Eurovision is like?
What is Eurovision like, Michael?
It's a lot like losing your sense of geography because Australia is not in Europe. That's ridiculous.
High five.
Yes.
Got him.
All right, well, we're going to have to leave it there, but we'll be back very shortly. Welcome back to The Leak. Well, the election is coming up soon, which means that Australians have the opportunity to decide who will be the next Prime Minister to be deposed by their own party. It's so exciting. What's going to happen next? Look, voting is a lot like going to Bunnings because you get a sausage sizzle at both, except if you make the wrong decision, Bunnings does have a returns policy at the very least. I'd like to return my Prime Minister. He's barely done anything. Now, this election will be a double dissolution, which sounds like the worst X-Men sequel ever. But unlike X-Men movies, double dissolution elections are actually quite rare. This type of election can only be called by the Prime Minister if the Senate rejects a bill twice. Now, when a double dissolution election is called, every MP in both the Senate and the House of Reps goes up for re-election. It's a political equivalent of turning the government on and off again. And if you're with the NBN, it might take a little bit of time to reconnect to the internet. The last time a double dissolution election was called was back in 1987 when Bob Hawke was returned as Prime Minister. Not only did Hawke dissolve the government, he would later go on to dissolve this beer in record time. Bob Hawke sculling a beer is the most exciting to happen in the cricket since Shane Warne tried to eat a beer. So what is the bill that has brought about this double dissolution? Well, it's a bill to fund the Australian Building and Construction Commission, or the ABCC. Who would have thought the ABC was just one typo away from having its funding increased? The ABCC used to be the watchdog of the construction industry, and its revival was condemned by Bill Shorten in a riveting speech.
Today, Mr Turnbull has decided to put his own future ahead of Australia's future. Today, Australians have seen a Prime Minister in full panic mode. There can be no better...
Do you know what's more interesting than Bill Shorten? That blank wall. So to sum it up, the ABCC is bringing about a double D election because it's a bill opposed by many Australians, including the Leader of the Opposition, who also happens to be a bill that many Australians oppose. Australian politics, it's as easy as ABC. C. This election, there are going to be some important changes to the ballot. For the first time, the ballot will include party logos. The logo for Nick Xenophon's party has some interesting inspiration.
About Nick Xenophon Giant X makes a big statement of X for Xenophon, but it's also exactly the same image that was used on the Ed Sheeran album X.
Nick Xenophon must be a big fan of Ed Sheeran, though it could have been worse. Imagine if he were a fan of Nirvana. Ooh. Anyway, never mind. In addition to these logos, voting for the Senate has changed to do with the complex preference swapping system.
The current system means voters can just put a 1 next to the party above the line, and the party decides which other candidates will be preferenced throughout the count. The proposed changes means that parties won't be able to specify preferences, and so control of preferences is handed back to voters.
See, previously, if you wanted to control the preferences in your vote, you had to vote below the line, which was pretty time-consuming. At the 2013 federal election, people in New South Wales had to number 110 boxes to control their preferences. Some of those people are still voting. The only time anyone should be marking 110 boxes is if you're Shane Warne at an STI clinic. It's the only time. Malcolm Turnbull did explain, though, why the reforms were necessary.
Australians were astonished to see people elected to the Senate whose primary votes were a fraction. In the case of one senator from Victoria, about 0.5% of the vote.
Exactly. You should only hold an office if the people voted you into it, said Malcolm Turnbull. But Malcolm does have a point. These changes will prevent senators from being elected with only tiny fractions of the vote. The senator Malcolm was referring to was Ricky Muir from the Australian Motoring Enthusiast Party, who'll be represented like this on the ballot paper. But maybe he'll be better represented by this graph. Because at the last election, Ricky became a senator with only 0.51% of the primary vote. That's barely above Bob Hawke's blood alcohol concentration. And well below Shane Warne's. I mean, you shouldn't become a senator based solely on the votes of your blood relatives. Now, look, yes, Ricky has grown into the role, but at the time, he was not ready to become a senator. Soon after he was voted in, home footage surfaced of him teaching his daughter how to do burnouts in a V8 with the heading 8-year-old girl smoking tyres. The number 8 should never apply to both the engine and the age of the driver. Actually, though, maybe this should have been his logo. Yeah, that would have been much better. John Madigan, who was elected with only 2.33% of the vote, is very upset about the changes.
John Madigan says voters are smart and that 1 in 3 deliberately chose not to cast their votes for the major parties in 2013.
So if you're doing such a hot job, fellas, why are people voting for people other than you, and why is their voice not entitled to be heard and given representation in this place?
I want to hear more of John's husky Batman voice. I'm not the senator you voted for, I'm the senator you deserve. Family First Senator Bob Day challenged the changes in the Senate voting at the High Court, where he told ABC News, "I feel like Daryl Kerrigan from The Castle." Sadly for Bob, the High Court dismissed his application unanimously and in their judgment told him that he was dreaming. But Bob didn't walk away empty-handed. He got his application framed and it's going straight to the pool room. So what's going to happen to these senators when they inevitably lose their seats? Well, Ricky Muir doesn't seem too fazed.
Very surprised if they didn't.
And this rule goes through, you're gone.
Yeah, look, there is a very real chance that I'll be gone. I've always stated that if anything like that was to ever happen, I'll be happy to go back to timber mill. So me personally, will be able to go back and spend a lot more time with my family.
Honey, get the engine warm. Daddy's coming home.
That was a very hard act to follow, but now on to our final story of the show.
What he knows about the Heimlich manoeuvre, it's the classic compression of the abdomen that comedy characters use to save people from choking. It's named after Dr. Henry Heimlich, who, despite inventing the life-saving technique back in 1974, had never had a chance to perform it personally. Until just last week, when an 87-year-old woman in Dr. Heimlich's nursing home began choking, the 96-year-old Dr. Heimlich leapt into action. Henry joins the likes of Bill Murray, who performed the Heimlich manoeuvre in the movie What About Bob? Bill Murray, who performed the manoeuvre again in Groundhog Day, and Bill Murray, who in 2015 performed the manoeuvre in real life, meaning Bill Murray has performed it more times than Dr. Heimlich himself.
Imagine the swings and roundabouts that poor choking woman would have been going through. You start choking, you look to the seat next to you, and there is the Dr. Heimlich. Good news. But just before he starts his first compression, he says to you sheepishly, "You know, I've never done this before." Bad news.
I think he must have been so excited. I mean, he's been waiting 52 years to test this out. Like, he was probably encouraging that woman not to chew her food.
Hey, don't chew, swallow it like a duck. Put the whole steak in your mouth, Agnes. Trust me, I'm a doctor.
I think it's amazing how Heimlich discovered that move, but I never just had a chance to put it to the test.
It must be bloody easy. It must have been bloody easy back in the 70s to get a manoeuvre named after you. Like if you just put my hand over my head and spin it around and bark like a dog. I'm not going to do it, but that's called the Anthony. And every time you do it, you have to call it the Anthony.
I've seen you on the dance floor doing the Anthony.
I think we all have, to be honest. I know a lot of people have said to their children, / have said it to me, if I ever go to a nursing home just to shoot me, so maybe she didn't want to be saved. Maybe Dr. Heimlich just should have shot her. Maybe.
I haven't quite done this Heimlich manoeuvre before, but does it involve a gun? I've brought it with me just in case.
But what did they do before the Heimlich manoeuvre? Like pre-1974? Like if you started choking on a piece of meat, were you just like, oh well, there they go. They had nothing to do.
There were just bodies lying all over the floor.
As
back
you were.
in 1974.
I know, but it was the #1 cause of death. I mean, that and, you know, LSD.
That was before our time. Well, your first Heimlich is a lot like losing your virginity. He didn't know where to put his hands and there was a lot of choking, but we got the job done.
Up top. Yep. Hey. I'm here for the claps.
So guys, that's been our first show for this season. You guys had fun?
I had a lot of fun.
What have we learned from tonight, would you say? Anthony, what's the talking point that you want to take out of tonight? What are people going to be talking about on social media after this show?
So many things are like losing your virginity.
Yeah.
It's incredible to me.
Fantastic.
It's also the only thing I took away from that. That I'm a very, very talented actress, and I've got a wide range. That's what I personally took home from that. About myself.
That's fantastic. Well, I learned that I'm never going to go to Everest because I think climbing Everest is a lot like making a bad decision. That's what it would be. That's what it would be like. Justin, have you had fun on the show
I've
tonight?
had fun, and I've learnt that sausages are not a hot political topic, really. That they just get cut off mid-sentence. And I just want to say, just for a moment, sausages have rights too. I just want to put it out there, OK? Thank you. Thank you.
Someone someone please think of the sausages?
No. Someone really has to stand up for the sausages because there just aren't enough rights out there for them.
Thank you.
That's fantastic.
Thanks.
All right. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us tonight. That's a wrap for our first show of season 2. I've been Michael Schaefer. Please put your hands together for the remarkable Anthony McCormack. And once again, for a brilliant debut from our new co-host, Jacqueline Mifsud.
Thank you.
And for the last time, please thank our guest panelist, Justine Sless. I've been Michael Schaefer. We'll see you guys next week. Good night.
About our situation, kids on curbs in admiration, tired kids with childish faces, parking lots in all the places. Think about our situation, kids on curbs.